So I've been thinking a lot about this habit that I had when I was a kid. And about a year ago, I learned there's actually a word for it. The word is maladaptive daydreaming. I'll just quick insert the Wikipedia definition of it, and then we can just hop into the topic. So I had this habit from roughly the ages of 6 to 14, and it stemmed from a lot of internalized self-hatred and body image issues, and the fact that I didn't really fit in with other kids. I was shy, I was scared of pretty much everything, and I was pretty introverted overall. But I was very creative. I watched a lot of cartoons, I read a lot of books, and I drew a lot. So I had like a lot of creative energy flowing through me at all times, and a lot of racing thoughts actually, which I guess is pretty much just a predecessor for the current anxiety and depression disorders that I have currently. So it's something that I've had since I was a kid, and maladaptive daydreaming was kind of a unproductive coping mechanism that I depended on when I was a kid. I just didn't realize what it was at the time, and neither did anybody else, really. So because of all the media that I consumed and the magazines I looked at and just the pictures and things like that, aesthetic became very important to me from an early age, and I had so much trouble expressing myself sometimes because I had all these ideas in my head. It was just like overflowing. I would draw all the time, but I felt like I could never really fully express myself, and I didn't know what to do. It got to the point where I just wanted to be part of the worlds that I created on paper. I used to make comic strips all the time. Like every day I had this set of characters that I created, and I would make comic strips like every day and show my parents, and basically every day they got an update of what my little characters were doing in their lives. So anyway, it got to a point where since I couldn't figure out how to express myself in the physical world, that I kind of just turned inward and ended up creating multiple elaborate worlds in my mind, and each of these worlds had its own unique setting, plot, characters, mood, etc. And so I created all these worlds. There were maybe 3 or 4 of them. It varied. So these worlds that I created were constantly evolving depending on what media I was consuming at the time. I would take ideas from books that I was reading or cartoons that I saw or just pictures that I saw, and I would incorporate it into these worlds in my head. And I would then switch between worlds in my head, kind of like the way that you would flip from channel to channel, or just from one show ending to another show starting. That's kind of what I would do, just all in my head. And I made up my own word for this when I was a kid. I called it think dreaming because it was daydreams or dreams that I thought up on my own. And in order to get into the headspace to kind of dive into these worlds, I would have to do mild aerobic stuff like pacing the floor or rocking in a rocking chair. And when I read the Wikipedia page, well, I didn't read the whole page, I just read the first little blurb that I inserted earlier, but when I first read that, I felt so targeted because it's like, holy crap, that is literally me. But anyway, so I kind of had to get lost in some kind of mindless motion in order to get into the right headspace. And it kind of makes me wonder if there was a little bit of ADHD going on. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell though, because I feel like there's a lot of overlaps between mental disorders and stuff like that. There's overlaps between ADHD and anxiety and depression, whatever. It's complicated, so I never really looked into the possibility of if I had ADHD or not, or if I still do. people in my life have told me that I kind of seem like I do, but I mean, what can you do? It is what it is. No big deal. I've been able to manage so far, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. But this habit became problematic for me because it got to the point where multiple times a day for seemingly like hours at a time, I would just be actively engaging in my maladaptive daydreaming, and I would forego social interaction. I would forego actual activities, like I stopped drawing, I stopped going outside and playing. I just kind of was in my own little world all the time, just pacing the floor like a madman, or sitting in the rocking chair in the dining room, just rocking, mindlessly staring into the abyss. And you can imagine that was probably a little weird to see a kid just like pacing the floor like a little anxious old man, but that was me. When I got to my early teen years, I started to grow out of it, of course, which is pretty normal because you tend to like lose some of your childhood creativity when you enter into young adulthood. But I actually remember the very moment when I decided to stop engaging in my maladaptive daydreaming. I was walking home from school or the store or something, and whenever I walked a lot when I was younger, because I lived in a small town, so everything was within walking distance. And whenever I was walking, I was probably think dreaming. And I was on my way home, and I was trying to think dream, and I was just like, I was getting bored with it. And then all of a sudden I thought to myself, what am I doing? Like, none of this is real. It's not helping me at all. This is pointless. Why am I continuing to do this? And so I just kind of stopped after that point, and I used all of the creative energy that I had previously been pouring into my alternate realities in my head, and I used that energy to start perfecting my space around me and my environment. I started like cleaning and organizing a lot and decorating. And like I said, aesthetic became a very important thing for me from a young age. And like whenever my environment is clean, organized, and pretty, I feel like it makes my headspace a little more clear, and I can get more done when my space is organized and set up the way that I want it. So, I guess that's a more healthy way to channel all of that energy, like creative, racing thoughts, anxiety type energy that was inside of me. I just channeled it into perfecting my environment and self-expression, basically. Like, I learned how to express myself through home decor and through like tattoos and stuff. I have, you can't really see any of them, but like I kind of like have a very specific style, and I use my my body art, my makeup. I'm not really wearing any makeup today, but I learned how to express myself in healthier ways that didn't lead to me just mindlessly pacing the floor like a maniac for hours. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that it was like being a maniac, because that's kind of like, that's just not a nice way to phrase it, but like, it clearly became a problem for me because I was foregoing actual like productive activity in order to just be stuck in my head all the time. And I think the effects of my maladaptive daydreaming habits when I was a kid have affected me in my adulthood, because I still get stuck in my head a lot. Like, I don't engage in maladaptive daydreaming anymore. Like, sometimes I'll just occasionally, like, my mind will wander, but that's normal. I get very stuck in my head, and whenever I do that, I have to push myself to just do something creative to get out of my own head and back into reality. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I kind of wanted to share my experience with maladaptive daydreaming, and since I learned recently that it's not as weird and unusual as I thought it was, if you're watching this, there's a possibility that you searched the term maladaptive daydreaming, and maybe that means that you kind of struggled with it before too. If you want to share your experience in the comment section, go ahead. It'd be cool to hear about other people's experiences with this, because I know for a long time I thought I was the only weirdo on the planet who did this, and it just made me feel really, really weird. So all in all, if you also were or are a maladaptive daydreamer, I encourage you to find other ways to express yourself in the actual physical world, because it's going to benefit you in the long run to use your creativity externally so that it can actually like serve a purpose other than driving you crazy slowly, I guess. You don't have to be like good at art or crafts or anything like that in order to do it. Just do it because it feels good to get all of that crap out of your head and onto paper or onto your environment somehow. It's a lot healthier than bottling everything up and living in a fantasy world, because it can really mess with your head, and it can affect your development later on in life, which I definitely think that my maladaptive daydreaming habit has effects that I still feel to this day. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I'm gonna go now. Thank you for listening.